For pretty much all of human history, we could only read the book of life. But now we can actually rewrite it. I'm talking about going into our own DNA, our very source code, and making changes. And no, this isn't some far-off sci-fi movie. It's happening right now, and it's bringing with it this incredible promise, but also some of the biggest questions we've ever had to ask ourselves. So that really brings us to the biggest question of all, doesn't it? What if we could actually edit our own evolution? I mean, think about that for a second. We're not just talking about treating a disease in one person, right? We're talking about making changes that could be passed down forever, fundamentally changing what it means to be human. Okay, so to really get our heads around this, we've got to go back to the beginning. We need to look at the scientific breakthrough that kicked this whole genetic revolution off. It's a technology with a kind of weird name, but trust me, it has completely changed the game in biology. And here it is, CRISPR-Cas9. The easiest way to think about it, it's like a pair of genetic scissors. Seriously, this little system, which scientists actually found in bacteria, can be programmed to hunt down a very specific spot in your DNA and just snip. And that one little cut? That's the key. That opens the door to rewriting the code of life itself. And what's just mind-blowing is how fast this tech has evolved. The first version of CRISPR, it was kind of like a hatchet, you know? It made a pretty blunt cut in the DNA. But the newer tools, they are so much more precise. You've got things like base editing, which is more like a tiny scalpel, changing just a single letter of the genetic code without even breaking the whole strand. And then there's prime editing, which is basically like the find and replace feature in a word processor. It's wild. In just a handful of years, we've gone from a hatchet to a pen. All right, so now we have this amazing, super precise genetic toolkit. The first thing everyone thinks of, and for good reason, is can we use this to cure disease? Can we finally tackle these illnesses at their absolute source? You know, for so many awful conditions, the best medicine could do was just manage the symptoms. But gene editing, this offers the chance to actually fix the problem, the genetic mistake that's causing it all. Think about diseases like sickle cell or Huntington's. These are often caused by just a single tiny typo in our DNA. And for the first time ever, the possibility of a real, actual cure is right there on the horizon. And this quote, it just hits you, right? It really gets to the heart of the urgency behind all the science. For the people, for the families living with these diseases, this is not some abstract ethical debate. It is a desperate, gut-wrenching plea for a lifeline. It's a chance to live without pain. And look, this hope isn't just a someday thing. It is already a reality. This is Victoria Gray. She suffered from the most excruciating pain you can imagine because of sickle cell disease. But after a truly groundbreaking therapy that used CRISPR to edit her own cells, she is now free of those symptoms. She's effectively cured. Her story is just, it's such a powerful example of how this tech is already changing real people's lives for the better. But, and you knew there was a but coming, this is where the story takes a turn and gets way more complicated. See, if you have the power to fix a gene that causes a disease, you also have the power to alter any trait. And that's when we step out of the clear-cut world of medicine and into the really thorny, controversial debate about designer babies. Okay, this is super important. There are two totally different paths here. On one hand, you have somatic therapy. That's what Victoria Gray had. Think of it like fixing a typo in one single copy of a book. It only affects her, the individual. But then there's germline editing. This is like going to the printing press and changing the master copy. If you edit an embryo or sperm or an egg, that change gets passed down to every single generation that follows. And that is the big ethical line in the sand. And when you ask the public about this, you see that line pretty clearly. Look at this. Using gene editing to treat a serious disease, 72% of people are on board with that. Makes sense. But using it to make a baby more intelligent? Whoa, that number drops all the way down to 19%. The public's gut feeling is pretty obvious. Using it as a therapy is one thing, but using it for enhancement, that's a whole different story. So you might be asking, why would anyone even consider taking such a huge step like germline editing? Well, you have to put yourself in the shoes of parents who know they carry a devastating genetic disease. Right now, their choices are just heartbreaking. The options they have don't work for everybody, and they often involve these absolutely agonizing decisions. So for them, germline editing isn't about enhancement. It could be the only hope they have for a healthy child that's genetically theirs without facing those impossible choices. And then, in 2018, this whole debate went from theoretical to terrifyingly real. A scientist in China, He Jiankui, just went for it. He completely ignored all the ethical rules, all the scientific warnings, and secretly created the world's first CRISPR babies. He edited the genes of twin girls. When he announced it, the world just exploded. The outrage was global, it was this huge shock, and it instantly turned a what-if fear into a very real, very scary cautionary tale. And that whole controversy really zeroed in on a core fear people have. What about fairness? A pretty big majority of people, 58%, believe this tech will just end up creating a whole new kind of inequality. A world where the wealthy can literally buy better genes for their kids, leaving everyone else behind. This fear, this idea of creating a genetic haves and have-nots, of society deciding which human traits are better than others, it's not a new fear at all. In fact, it casts a very, very dark shadow from our past. And that shadow has a name: eugenics. It was the scientifically bankrupt and profoundly immoral theory about improving the human race through planned breeding. Basically, deciding who should and shouldn't have children. And let's be clear, this was not just some abstract, ugly idea. It had real horrific consequences. Right here in the US, eugenics led to the forced involuntary sterilization of at least 60,000 people. And it was used to target specific groups: people of color, the poor, people with disabilities. This is an ancient history, and it's exactly why the modern talk of genetic enhancement rings so many alarm bells. Now, the old eugenics movement was built on total junk science, but the fear today is that these powerful new technologies could accidentally bring its dangerous ideas roaring back to life. You know, as soon as we start having conversations about which genes are good or desirable, we're walking a very, very fine line. We start echoing the exact same kind of thinking that led to so much harm in the past. Okay, so the stakes are obviously incredibly high. The question then becomes, how do we possibly move forward with this in a responsible way? Well, the good news is the global community is trying to figure that out, trying to build some guardrails around this incredibly powerful tech. And the key idea that keeps coming up is this phrase: broad societal consensus. The point is, a decision this big, one that affects the future of literally our entire species, can't just be left up to a few scientists in a lab. It demands a massive global conversation. We all need to be part of this before anyone takes the irreversible step of editing the human germline. And that's why organizations like the World Health Organization are stepping in. They've put forward a whole framework for how to govern this stuff. It includes things like, making all the research public and registry so there are no secrets, actively going after illegal and unethical research, getting the public involved and educated. And this one is huge, making sure that if and when these therapies become available, everyone has access to them, not just the rich. So we come full circle, right back to the heart of it all. Science has answered the question, can we? The answer is yes, we can do this. But now we're faced with the much, much harder questions. Should we? And maybe the most important question of all, who gets to decide? We are, right now, standing at a massive fork in the road for humanity. For our entire history, our story was written by the slow, random process of evolution. But now, for the very first time, we have the power to pick up the pen ourselves. And the choice we make now is going to define everything that comes next. So what will it be? Are we going to keep writing our story, or are we going to start editing it?